Yeah, me too. Thanks. Hey,
Hey
Joe.
guys,
Hi, Jove.
hi, how are you doing?
Very well. You're welcome.
Glad to hear. We are live. So let me know if the screen is visible.
It is.
Yes.
Nice. That's one. And yeah, we are also having the live going on, which is great. So if if there is somebody else than you two watching on YouTube, welcome. So for today we have rather nice topics, I would say. Um, and I'm gonna start off by explaining how this works. So basically, um, for people that are gonna watch afterwards, I have a community. Inside this community, I make posts weekly asking for topics, and then we are collecting topics. And inside this live stream, which is happening on Wednesdays, we are discussing those topics. For this week, for the agenda, we have localization, how we can do that on Android. It is rather simple topic, but still I want to cover some important things there. And then I would like to talk a little bit about architecture, in particular, a topic that is most of the time, or at least the way I see it on Android, it brings more confusion than actually solves a problem. So we are going to look into that, or at least my perspective, and hopefully make the things clear. So that's what we've got on the agenda. For the people inside the community, they are currently on the call because this is also we are having a call, and then everybody's welcome to ask questions. For you guys, as you know, you can just unmute yourself and shoot your question if you need or if you have one. And for the people on YouTube, feel free to ask the questions in the chat. Yeah, and then let me also make sure here I have everything set, because I'm gonna be sharing something, actually a drawing. Then I want to make sure that everything is set. And yeah, so that's great. Okay. Alrighty. Hello, Shafak.
Hello, how are you?
Good, good, good. Everything is okay.
Yeah, I was quite busy with, yeah, could not catch up. Yeah.
Cool.
How
All
was
right.
everything with you?
Everything's fine. I don't know if you're up to date, but we are actually streaming these sessions now on YouTube.
Yeah, I heard last time I was there. Yeah.
Nice. And currently it is also live. And I was waiting for like maybe 5 minutes to get started. And actually, let's get started. So, for the agenda for today, what we've got is localization, and also we are going to take a look into architecture. So, we're going to start off with localization and what does it mean. So, basically, on Android, it is super easy to support multiple languages for an application if you need to. And it is pretty straightforward to do that, or easy to do that. And I would like to actually talk about some edge cases or some things that I got from my experience in the past 15 years that I would like to maybe share and cover in this stream, or we are going to begin with that. So basically, the way we are defining these translations for different languages is that we have this resource folder on Android. And basically here, by default, it comes when we create a project with values folder. And inside it has this strings.xml where we're gonna put key values in an XML format. So here is an example of that. So basically we have welcome message, which is the key, and we can load that value by that key. And the way to do that, we're gonna take a look into it just in a bit. Um, the idea is that we can actually have this file translated in many different languages. And then when an application is running on a device that has different locale set or different language, if that's supported, it's going to load that file instead of the default one. So For example, here we have some strings. And let's say I want to make a translation into different language. So to do so, I will have to create here in the resources additional directory, which is going to be values dash, and then what's the language that I want to translate these to. Now these are these shortcuts. They need to be I mean, these keys here that we are putting, they're predefined, and we'll have to look into the documentation to find the correct ones. For example, there is no Belgian language. But if you are willing to translate your application for Belgium, you can either have it in Dutch or in French. And in that sense, this couldn't be BE, but it would be different. I think it was R. What was it, like NL, like BENL or something like that, and then BEFR, something like that. I don't remember from the top of my head. I'll have to take a look, but basically that is something that we have to pay attention to. And then for regular other languages, like if we want to translate these to another language, like Dutch, for example, we can just put what's the language letters, so to say. And now that we have this, what we could do is we can copy pretty much the same file, because we need to have the same keys here, and then have a translation. Oh yeah, Zeynep has said here, so it would be something like, if I want to translate for Belgium, it's gonna be values BE R and what was it? Let me check the message quickly. R and L. So region and L. R stands for region, I think. So it would be something like this. Then, and then here would be the Dutch translations for Belgium. Okay. Now, what's important here is that we have the same string file. Like the name doesn't matter. Like what matters is this here. Like we have resources tag, and inside we are defining strings. We can define different resources. Strings is one, and that's what is important. But the name of this file can be literally whatever you want. And then another important thing is that if something is missing in this file, so let's say for the Dutch translation, we are missing these few. Then in the code, if we are referencing, let's say label about, and it couldn't find it, it's gonna go back to the default, which is in this one. So it's gonna load the default translation for that. That's also important thing to note. And another, so let's actually make some translations here. So let's say, for example, this one is gonna be, I think so, I'm not very sure. And this one would be, yeah, go ahead, Shafak.
Are we going to just copy paste of this thing like that? Isn't it some kind of automation available for?
Yeah, I am going to talk about it just in a bit.
Okay,
So here I
yeah,
just want to cover some basics.
Mhm.
Now, so let's say these two, login title and sign up title, I have like, I tried to translate that to Dutch. I'm not sure if this is correct, but let's bear with me for now. What happens next is let's create a composable like translations example. So here I'm gonna just create a composable, and I'm gonna add preview. And I don't know if I can have a preview for different locales, but let's just have a preview here, and then we're gonna figure it out. Example translations, and then here I would just add a text, And the text is going to be, how am I going to load that is by getting string resource. And then I would reference it by r.string, and then I have to import this. And it would be the one from the same module that I'm having. And I would say login title. And now let me open the preview and see this in action. How does it work? Waiting for the build. Meanwhile, so here we go. Let me see if I can change this to different language. So yeah, locale. So it loads actually which locales I'm supporting. So if I select NL, it is going to, as you can see, I don't know if this is visible. So let's maybe wrap this into a column that's going to have some sort of padding. Let's say 12 dp and a background. Theme, color scheme, background. And then I would wrap all of this into app theme 2. Like that. Okay, so now we see the correct thingy. Additional thing that we could do is we can have in the strings, we can have variables or like placeholders. And actually we can position them, which is also interesting. So how do we do that? Let's say here, I'm going to add a string that's gonna be loaded items, let's say. And now here I would say, I can add a placeholder like for how many items are going to be loaded. Let's name this, for example, I can, if there is one, I can just say $S. S stands for string, it could be div or digit, if you see it somewhere. And then like this is gonna be like how many items are loaded. What's the problem? It's not translated. Yeah. So this is a cool tooling from Android Studio that tells that this one is not translated in Dutch, for example, which is okay. So now what I wanted to do is, better way to do this is like to add positioning. So here I can say %, then the position, like this is going to be my first position, and $S is going to be for the string, items loaded. Now, if I use this here, what I could do is, let's maybe make this smaller so it's going to be more visible. I could say items loaded here, or loaded items. What I can do actually when calling string resources, I can add arguments afterwards. And then here, if I pass 10, for example, it's gonna, because this is the first argument afterwards, it's gonna put it on the first position. This might not work because I don't have that translated into, yeah. So let's see. So first I'm gonna change this to default. That should fix it for now, I guess. Because I have the translation, but no, it doesn't like that. So let's actually, for now, pull the same translation and put it here without actually translating. So I don't know what's the issue now. Build and refresh, yeah. Alrighty, so now as you can see, the first argument is taken and it is put there. Now if I have another one, so I can have, for example, percent $2 s out of %1 items are loaded. So like basically what I'm trying to do here is to say that, okay, this is going to be the second argument. This is going to be the first argument, even though they appear in the sentences like first, second, to see how it is going to work. And then now I'm able here to pass more than one argument. So here I can say 5. And it will say 5 out of 10 items are loaded. So 5 goes second, and the second is being applied here out of the first items are loaded. So that's about the placeholders and the positioning, what I wanted to share. And the last thing that I would like to share code-wise is how do we do plurals? So when it comes to the localization, for example, there are situations when we need to have, let's say, we have one item loaded or multiple items loaded. And that can work for different languages too. How do we do that? Basically here, we could add plurals, and we can name this something like, actually, items loaded test. So I just want to have something I can distinguish. And now here I can add an item. And now I have to define what's going to be the quantity. And as you can see, the tooling already suggests me. Like I can have few, many, one, other. Most of the time you're going to have something like one, because one item, and then multiple items, like 0 items, and so on and so forth. So I can have one. For one, I can have percent. Like if I still want to have a placeholder, percent $1 is item loaded. And then here I'm gonna have other items loaded. Then let me take this and use it here. But how do I use this? How do I make a call now? Is instead I should use items loaded, but I couldn't use string resource. I should use plurals. So plural string resource. Then what's the ID? R, instead of string, I have to use plural items test. And then here I have to pass arguments. So I would pass 1. And then 1 is like I have to repeat it. Why? Because 1 is like what's going to be the argument, and then what's going to be the quantity. Or maybe it is, yeah, which one is, yeah, the first one is the count or the quantity. The second is like the placeholder. One item loaded. So if I make this 2, it's going to be 2 item loaded, because here is the quantity defines how many actually. So if I put 2, it's going to be items loaded, or 0, for example. Yeah, go ahead. Whoever had a question. Yeah, Shafaq.
Can you use the name parameters here for more clarity?
I don't
Name
think
item.
so. Cool.
Okay.
Well, here, I mean, yeah, on the call of the function, yes, you can use something like ID equals.
Mhm.
You can use count equals, and then the format arg equals 1. Was it format arg? Format args.
Ah,
Although, oh yeah, this one, because like it is var arg. If I use named argument, I have to put it in a list or something. So maybe like stick to something like that. That's format. Okay. Now, another thing is, let's actually convert this like, or change this to, for example, I am going to remove this, or I can say one item loaded, and then items loaded, whether this is going to work. And what if I have, let's say, item 0, then here I'm going to have no items loaded. How this is going to work? Let's sync. So if I put 0, it should say no items loaded. But instead it says 0 because I think, because we have here other. So other takes it over because I'm also having here like quantity. So in that sense, probably here, well, here, I should remove that one. Okay, no, it's not how it works, it seems. So either we have a placeholder or we don't. So if I take this and put it here and also put it here, what is going to happen? Let's see. Okay, again, it is saying 0 items loaded. Okay, anyway. At least like this is what we can try to test, or how the things are working. And additionally, what we can do here is like, if I have, let's say, a string, here I can also reference it. So like this no items loaded could be different string. So label no items loaded, that's gonna be like no items loaded. And then here I can say at string no label no items loaded. So I can also reference from the plurals, I can reference another string basically from my regular ones. That's also possible, also to keep in mind. So that's let me see if I missed something. So we covered so far the strings, the placeholders, the plurals, and how we can do the combination. Like how we can combine, for example, from here, reference another string. So far, so good. Next is what I wanted to talk about when it comes to translation is like some practices that I have been trying and what turned out working. So oftentimes companies are having a software that does the translation in a centralized place. So depending on the software, like plural, what was that? Localize, I think it is the software. Yeah, there is a software called Localize, I think, where you can actually have all your translations into one place. And then you can also hire different people that are, let's say, language-related folks per country that are going to do the translations in a professional way. And then they're going to be responsible per file. So that could be the case. So what happens then is like you have the translations in that system, and when updated, you are going to execute a command pretty much like a git pull, and it's going to insert all the translations here for you, depending on the software. And that is very common thing, depending on the applications. Like most of the time, this happens with social apps. I had an experience to work on a social app that had, I think, over 150 million daily active users. It was called Ask.fm. It was a social network for kids. And we were supporting over 30 languages there. And we had one system where both like the translations were managed for both Android and iOS on the same platform. Now, when it comes to practices, go ahead, Shafak.
Have you used Phrase for translation management?
Which one?
Phrase, it's an online tool where you can remotely manage the key and the values, and over the Gradle task, you just files. It generates the string files based on the keys and values on Phase website,
Mhm.
where you can manage the translation. So
Yeah.
it's a kind of very dynamic thing. Is it a kind of similar thing what you are discussing?
Yes. Yes. I think all these systems are working a similar way,
Mhm.
right? So I wouldn't say that they differ too much, but it just depends on like the support that they are providing. They all, in a way, work in a similar manner. Um, so when it comes to, like, for example, depending on whether you are going to use such system or not, then you may ask, how am I going to structure? Because, like, let's say this code base here is a modularized thing, and now I have here feature modules that are basically having the UI, and then am I going to put the translations related to the login inside my login module, then the translations about the post details in my post details module. So am I gonna modularize them as well, or how am I going to do that? In my experience, it is much better to actually have a shared module like here that I have the UI, and here I'm going to have all my translations and all the drawables that are shared across, because the feature modules, which are basically UI modules, are depending on my shared UI. And the shared UI is the module that provides, let's say, composable or like those dependencies, like navigation, that kind of things, all the UI related dependencies. But also it can provide the common drawables, the fonts, the values, or the string translations in this case. And what happens is that, yeah, maybe like, let's say the sign up is going to have access to all the strings, but is that much of a problem? I don't think so. So it depends. Like maybe some people would say, well, if you are managing manually the translations, then you can have them per module. So like it really depends on what works for you. So like if you're having, let's say, maybe a team dedicated for the sign up only module, and then they're gonna have the management themselves. So it really depends on the context and on the team. But that's something to consider. So this is something that worked for me over the years. So I would suggest that one. Alrighty. Now let me actually reset what I've done so far so that the project compiles and everything is fine. And next topic that I would like to talk about is related to architecture. So we are going to slowly move there, and then we are going to have some time for Q&A. And when it comes to architecture, I will be drawing here something because most of the time I will be talking and drawing. But before all of that, let me give a little bit intro or what made me talk about architecture today. Essentially, there are lots of debates. Like most of the time when we are talking about architecture on Android, something that comes to the conversation is clean architecture. So like often people are talking about clean architecture, and often there are debates what the clean, like around clean architecture, like would you use cases? No, you shouldn't use cases. Should you use data source? Not data source. What about repositories and all of that? And then there are debates like then if you do this it is not clean, if you do that it is clean, all of that. Now I'm going to talk from my perspective for what I consider or how I would how am I seeing the whole thing. So basically, when it comes to all these debates, nobody's questioning what actually makes the clean architecture clean. So are those use cases, are the specific, like having specific classes, or is it the structure that actually it is, or the rules that it is implying? So that is actually the essential question, or something that we are actually going to draw just in a bit. So the question to ask is what makes the clean architecture clean? So does, like, for example, um, get bearer token and store it to shared preferences use case make it clean? Is that what makes it clean? So imagine a beginner looking into such use case. What they're gonna think, oh, this is what makes clean architecture, right? Having such a complexity. So in a way, we have to be more responsible towards beginners, and we have to like understand. So at least from my understanding or from my perspective, any architecture, call it clean or whatever, that's why I actually put here pragmatic architecture, is about separation of concerns. So anything that comes to like architecturally is about splitting the concerns or separating them. And what this allows us to do is to actually, as I said, split the responsibilities so that we can actually, when it comes to maintaining or editing the code, have a like more narrow place to do the edits. So splitting the responsibilities, maintainability, testability, and probably the most important is the simplification as much as possible. So like what I mean simplification as much as possible in terms of architecture is like sometimes like there are two basically core complications in software. The essential complication, which is when the problem that we are trying to solve is complex. So if you think about things like, I don't know, let's say a software for a hospital or for health, or let's say maybe for tax, depending on the country that you're building that, it could get very complex. Complicated because of the problem at hand is complicated. So that's something that we call essential complication. But what about the other one? The other one is accidental complication, or the complication that we imply by making our decisions. So the decisions that we make when building the software are contributing to this accidental complication. And actually, when I say any architecture is about simplification, is like to keep it to this complication as to minimum, to as little as possible. So my proposal is, how about we all get a little bit more practical with architecture and actually do what makes sense or what works or what is like as simple as possible for the problem at hand, rather than debating constantly like, oh, you should use use cases, oh no, my use cases are like not making sense or whatever. So if you even if you take a look at the Google's documentation about architecture or structuring the app, they would have something like they try to stick to simplicity. So let's actually go now to the drawing and see what I'm actually talking about all this time. So most of the time, when people are talking about clean architecture, or like all the components that you may have when we are talking about clean architecture, is something like we have our UI, then there is some sort of view model, or like we can put all of this into a UI. Then we have like it can have use case that the view model is talking to. Then there is this thing like the use case can talk to repository. Then this one can talk to data source. And then this one can talk to, let's say, an API or a database. Like, let's actually make it more, how to say, like it can talk to, wait, let me delete this. Eraser, this one. Something like API or database or disk. So imagine if all the applications are having all of that. Most of the time, most of the applications are having just some crude operations, which means create, read, update, delete. And they are fairly simple. So most of the code that is written in these applications is around the UI and the state management. And most of the layers that are gonna be introduced there are having just, they are introducing an indirection. So how many times or how often are you seeing, let's say, a use case that has an execute function that just delivers a call to a layer underneath it, be it repository, be it data source, whatever you have in the code. Very often, right? So then the question is, what is the purpose of that use case? Right? So like we end up into doing something for the sake of doing it, or for the because we saw an article online, or somebody was preaching to us to do that. So my suggestion is to actually think about what we need and stick to as simple as possible. So as I said, even Google is having that that approach or suggestion. So what they say is like, probably we're gonna have something like a presentation where you actually have your UI and a view model. Then optionally, you are gonna have a domain. And then you are talking to external world here. So, or well, basically data, which is going to talk to external world, like database or API, HTTP, let's say, database or disk. Now, the domain, as I said, most of the time we are having CRUD operations. The domain is pretty much optional. So if we consider that the domain most of the time is going to contain things like use cases, and if the use cases are just forwarding calls, chances are the domain is like, it could be an optional thing. We may not need it. And in that sense, the view model would eject something from like a repository, let's say. And then the repository will talk to an API. Like, imagine here, I'm talking about a retrofit interface. In that sense, we are minimizing the layers, and we are actually making it easy to test, to maintain, and so on and so forth. And we are not gonna have something like, let's say, I mean, I am just mentioning these classes, but doesn't mean that, like, if I say a use case, like, it could be anything, but just like a layer that is just bringing in direction. It doesn't have any role. It doesn't do much. It just forwards a call. Most of the time we see that in a use cases. That's why I'm saying a use case. So when it comes to architecting, the things that I am most of the time advocating for is to keep or to keep simple, is like to actually apply the rules of what an architecture is about. So what are the rules is like, you are having some layers. Essentially, you are having some layers. And if you consider that previous drawing with the layers, you're gonna have, let's say, your presentation, where you have your UI and your view model. And then the presentation, let's say if you are having a layer underneath that is, let's say, a repository, or anything you want to have here, or a use case. Let me make that better. So you can have either use case or a repository. The thing is that the presentation knows about this layer, but this layer has nothing to do with the presentation. It doesn't know anything about the layer above it. So this one, because the presentation knows about this layer will define the types, and it will return the results back as these types, but it doesn't know anything about the presentation. The presentation knows about this layer, meaning it is aware of the types that it can return. So in a sense, the presentation talks to this, makes calls to it, and it gets back results from it. So it is aware of the types. And then this one may talk to lower level further, and the same story applies. This one here knows about the layer below, but the layer below doesn't know anything about the layer above. So this can be data, can be whatever you want. And so these are the rules that we should actually put in place to make the thing simpler or easier to work with, or more maintainable, and so on and so forth. So like, again, this one will define some types that, come on, I can type types, that can be returned here, because this one now knows about it, about this one, it knows about its types. We can return the types, and this one can make calls down, but this one couldn't make calls up. So that's rule number one. And then another rule is that we shouldn't actually skip layers. So like the presentation shouldn't directly talk to data. And then this one wouldn't know about this. This one wouldn't know about this. So if we just put these two principles into perspective and stick to as minimalistic as possible, I think we're gonna end up with something that is like considered clean. So not by the book, but something that actually you can maintain, keep it simple, so on and so forth, and test it and basically scale over time. And when it comes to these sort of diagrams, it's important to know that this is more on the higher level of abstraction. And the down, like when we go down, this is lower level of abstraction. So so what happens basically is like the higher levels of abstractions know about the lower levels and not the opposite. Although the presentation doesn't directly know about the data, it knows about the layer below, and the layer below knows about the layer below. So that's actually what I wanted to maybe talk a little bit. And I think this is not something that I just thought about. This is something that I've been practicing in the last at least 10 years, but more like 15. Like in the last 10, I actually was paying attention to this. Since I started test driving code, I started learning more about architecture and design. This is actually something that I'm using in most of the applications, and turns out working. And that's why, like, where these thoughts are coming from. It's not like something that I started doing yesterday. It's like experience from the last 10, 15 years. And yeah, so instead of like engaging into debates what clean architecture is, maybe think about what pragmatic architecture is, because every project is different, every project has different demands, and apply what actually works. Maybe there is a project where you do need to have proper, like, multiple things inside the, let's say, a domain, and multiple things in the domain. But the question is like, what is a domain? In which cases do you need a domain in an application? So there could be like, usually what domain means is like a place where we are holding business rules. That's like the domain knowledge, the business rules. And different businesses are having different business rules. And most of the time, this is kept on the backend. If it's something that is kept on in the application, probably it makes sense. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't use all of these anywhere. I'm saying just use what really works, or what works for that particular project. So you can have, let's say, a view model that would inject a use case that will talk to an API directly, like API meaning retrofit interface. Or you can have you can have a view model that injects repository that talks to a retrofit interface, or database DAO, whatever you have in your, like if you're talking to database. So think about it. That's what I wanted to have and to share today. And now we have 15 more minutes, so let's actually switch to Q&A if there are some. For the people on YouTube, if you have any questions, you can drop them in the chat. And if you're not actually in the call, but if you're in the call, rather speak, so it's going to be also recorded. Go ahead, Anthony.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jov,
And
for Can you hear me?
yeah.
Great. Yeah, I was thanking you for this session and for the enlightenment. At some point it was becoming almost like a rule that when you write your application, you have to have use cases, and that if you don't have use cases, then it's not clean architecture. But yeah, with this, with the knowledge you've shared, I think it helps to throw more light to the fact that you don't always have need for use cases to necessarily make it a clean architecture, right? You also mentioned when you were sharing that the domain layer is optional. And yeah, that's the same thing on the Google documentation, that domain layer is optional. But I'm wondering a case where you would want to have domain models, right? Are they not supposed to live in the domain layer? Or is there a chance that you want to build an app that does not require domain models? Like you're building an app that is using the DTO, even in the domain, even in the presentation layer. Would that be a good use case?
Yeah, as I said, it really depends on the thing that you are building. It could be very simple thing that you are building, and then the code is small, and like it doesn't really need to, like, you can actually use the entities that are coming from the network. This is not the best advice I can give you, but you can do this. You can use the entities that are coming from the network and use them. But what is better practice to have your domain types and then have some sort of mapping between what comes from the backend to our domain type. Why it is okay, or why it is nice approach to do, or good practice, is so that if the backend changes by some reason, like maybe versioning, maybe different things, you're not gonna go ahead and change all over the code base, the types, but you are gonna have one theme place where you are gonna do the changes. But again, you have to take a look into like how likely you will have to do this, or how likely the project is going to scale. So if it's very simple, very small thing, um, you have to just think whether it is worth it to bother or not. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, got it. Thank you.
And to go back to the first comment that you had about what we spoke about use cases, I'm not like, so you like, you can call these classes the way you want. It's more about the layering that I'm talking. Like you can call them use cases. That's fine. But like introducing layer of indirection for the sake of it, that's what I'm sort of trying to say against, um, or eliminate in a way. So if you have a use case that talks to like whatever, let's say database DAO, I'm fine with it. But if you have a use case that talks to repository, that talks to data source, which is mostly what we are seeing. Like if I go back to this drawing, like you are having all these levels of indirection, view model talking to use case, talking to repository, talking to data source, and all of like basically these two just forwarding calls. Like what's the purpose of it? There's absolutely no value, just more code to maintain, more code to think about. And yeah, like if you are paid by line of code, cool, do this. Um, uh, Sushil, I guess, if I'm pronouncing your name correctly.
Yeah, that's right. So, yeah, thank you for hosting such important topic here. My question is not particularly around the topic, but I think it kind of connects.
Mm-hmm.
So when we have some backend response in our view model, and based upon the response, we need to navigate to different screens, right? So what would be the best approach, like sending some channel events, share flow, or creating, I see in online, like creating custom navigator and directly navigate from view model, or using channels, or what would be the best approach when we have a response from repository, and then based upon the response, we need to navigate to different screens, right?
Yes.
So it could be a whole separate topic we can do, or maybe a quick answer. What do you think on this?
Yeah, I'm gonna give you a quick answer. What is the best way? I don't know. I'll tell you what works, what used to work for me, and what works. What I'm sure that it works. I would think of splitting like, what's the navigation? The navigation is part of the UI. So like we navigate inside the UI. Then from the response, something comes in, and we have to make a decision to navigate. What I would do is, from the view model, I'm going to expose, because the view model basically keeps the state. And from the view model, I'm going to expose an event that I'm going to observe in my UI. And I would say, okay, if this happens, I'm going to navigate. So whatever comes from the repository updates or like exposes an event, and then it's the responsibility of the UI to navigate somewhere. So it's gonna
Okay.
collect these events, and then when collected, it's gonna navigate. If the UI is not active, it's not gonna collect anything. It's not gonna navigate.
Okay. So basically, if I'm using a share view model in like 5 different screens, then from view model, I'll send some channels event, emit some channel event, and then, but I need to collect those possible events in every one of the screens then.
Yes. So
Okay.
if you have a shared one, I would instead of channel, I would use shared flow maybe.
Share flow. Okay.
Yeah, and then yeah, whenever I need, I will collect those events, and based on those events, I would do the navigation.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thanks so much.
and then it depends, like on the use case. It might be, for example, a situation when you have um, the navigation set in a way that you have some sort of top level thingy where you can collect these things, and then a subgraph for the rest of the screens. And then when this event happens, you can navigate regardless in which screen you are currently.
Mhm.
It really depends on the setup, I would say.
Okay. Yeah.
But the approach is gonna work regardless, because like it allows you to keep the UI separate from what happens here. And then by changing the UI, you can still like mix and match or play with it, and you can still like do this navigation based on those events.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you.
I'm not saying that like having a navigator inside your view model is wrong. If that works for you, fine. I wouldn't mix it personally,
Got it.
because it won't, like, it will disallow me to test my view model. It will just make the view model responsible for too many things. So like if I have more arguments against it, um, testing being one, and this like mixing responsibilities being second one, I wouldn't do that. That's
Okay.
it.
That makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome. Cool. All right. Any more questions? All right. If that's it, thank you so much for attending the call. For the people on YouTube, basically we are having every Wednesday. As I said, I'm running a community, and inside the community we are having a live call where we are discussing these things, and we are streaming that on YouTube. So if you want, you can find a link in the description, join the community, and then you can contribute to the topics that will be discussed. Yeah, thanks everyone. If you feel like we can dive deeper into any of these, let's actually have that conversation in the community, and I'll be happy to actually dive deeper into anything of this. And with that, thank you so much for the time and the attention. I really appreciate coming into such a big number today. And yeah, looking forward to chatting with you inside the community. Cheers, everyone. Thank you for attending.